what to do with all of these parts of ourselves that hate ourselves, right? That part of you that feels undeserving, unworthy, unloved, not enough, like a piece of shit, ugly, disgusting, horrible bastard. What to do with all of that, right? How to love the part of you that hates yourself. This is something all of us, I would say, contend with within ourselves to some extent. There's very few among us in this society who escape childhood without some sort of a wound, without some sort of a subconscious belief of, I am not enough, I am unworthy, I am unloved, to some extent, right? And that varies from person to person depending on your childhood experiences. But even those of us who have had what we would call a good upbringing with good parents, loving parents, even then it's unlikely we've come through childhood without picking up some sort of a sense which has then been sort of built into our makeup, essentially our nervous system, right? That we are not enough. And so that'll show up in that voice in our head telling us, oh, you're this, you're that, you know, what's wrong with you, blah, 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 blah. What to do with that, how to deal with that, how to come to a relationship with that that is most conducive to well-being, peace, love. First things first, stop fighting it. Stop resisting it. Stop getting into a war with that part of yourself. Stop responding to these silly thoughts with more silly thoughts. Right, so there's that. There's responding to it in that way and then just ended up in a never-ending loop and spiral of just warring back and forth with yourself, trying to convince yourself, like, no, I am enough. No, this is stupid. No, I am. Do you mean it's like... And there's something to be said, right, for reprogramming the mind in that way. So when those thoughts come up telling you you're this or you're that, to like correct that, we're like, no, I'm this, no, I'm that, no, I am love, no, I am enough, whatever it is. There's a place for that. Ultimately, though, I don't think that goes far enough. It doesn't go deep enough into the subconscious belief, right? That's where the work is. That's where the transmutation takes place. That's where we find more love for that part, and then ultimately for ourselves and within ourselves, and just more love. But the first thing is to stop resisting it, and that's the natural kind of response, right? Especially when we haven't yet built that understanding of that voice in our heads, where that comes from, why that is there. There's resisting it, and then there's also trying to avoid it, trying to push it down, trying to bury it, trying to distract, trying to numb and suppress. This is obviously very prevalent in our culture and something we all experience again to some extent or another, I would say. Well, obviously what we resist will always persist. So the first thing is acceptance. This is reality, right? This is happening. This is part of my experience. And then the process of going beyond that, of shifting that, of changing that in some way, as I said, really then requires the work on the subconscious level. And so this is where we get into parts work. Internal family systems, if you've heard of that, this type of therapy, works with the idea of parts. There's parts of us, right? So different parts of who we are, of our personality, of our makeup, they get triggered in different situations, come online in different situations. Often we will like some parts, dislike other parts, and so that's when we end up trying to push things away, trying to reject, trying to deny certain aspects of ourselves. And certainly this part that hates ourselves, that's not generally a part that we like, right? It's like So we very much end up trying to resist that, push that away, fight that in some way. Parts work, I won't give you the whole, like, you know, if you don't know about parts work, if you don't know about internal family systems, go and look that up, because it offers a very useful, a very helpful framework for understanding what we are experiencing within ourselves, and then ultimately how to kind of change our relationship to that. And that's the thing with these things, is it's not about changing that part, it's not about getting rid of that part, it's about changing our relationship to that part so that it's not having such a effect on us, a detrimental effect on us. Because when we're just unconsciously sort of running that program of I'm not enough, I'm a piece of shit, I'm undeserving, whatever it is, we're believing that, right? It's like, until that is really questioned and looked at and kind of the underlying sort of pain is processed, we're just playing that out and we're believing that, and that's colouring our whole perception of life, reality, what we're expecting to see for ourselves, what we're expecting to happen. And so parts work allows us to address the kind of root of that. And what you'll often find is this voice, this part that is telling you, you're this, on your back all the time, is what in parts work is called a protector part. So that's the part that comes online to try and protect you from feeling what is referred to as the exiled part, which is the original pain that was at one point too much to bear, to sit with, to experience, right? Generally, that's going to be some sort of a feeling of, I'm not enough, I'm unloved, generally in relation to our parents or caregivers. When we've had experiences in childhood, which is natural, right? You're not going to escape this. It's natural at some points to feel, you know, when the love of your parents is withdrawn in some way, right? When they're not being the most loving that they can possibly be, which they're not going to all the time, of course, and none of us will. That feeling of, I'm unloved. That feeling of, why don't you love me? What's wrong with me? So this part that is berating us on our case all the time is often just trying to protect us from just feeling that. And so then when we can tap into that, to that deeper level of pain that is there, that these other parts are built around trying to avoid, one, you sort of, the part that has then come online to protect you from that, can just chill out and go away for a bit again. This is like, it's there to try and avoid feeling that. But if you just go ahead and feel that, well, then it doesn't need to continue trying to stop you doing that, because, and so there's that aspect of it, the process of coming into contact and familiarity and comfort with that underlying feeling of, fuck, I'm not enough, I don't feel loved, I'm undeserving, which can be a process. Ultimately, the more you build your capacity to hold that, and the more you get comfortable with that feeling, and the more you stop like being enmeshed with it, right? Just seeing it for what it is. It's a feeling rooted in a past experience, which in my younger childhood self, which was incapable of making sense of that and processing that and recognizing, oh no, my mum does love me, but she's just fucking, this is that's going on, and maybe she just shouted at me and whatever. That's, you know, we're not thinking that way as a child. We're just thinking, why don't you love me? What's wrong with me? So just seeing it for what it is, right? Without having to kind of believe the feeling, give anything more to it than what it is. It's just a feeling. And so the more you can come into contact with that, the less you have that need for that other part to protect you from feeling that, right? The more comfortable you are with just feeling, oh, I don't feel loved, I'm undeserving, like, the less that protector part is needed to protect you from that. And then also, and this is a big part of like what allows things to start to shift and transmute, I found in my experience and working with other people, when you really open up into that underlying pain. And the thing is, like, we won't have accessed that, right? Most of us spend our lives doing everything we can to avoid feeling that underlying original pain in different ways, unconsciously. But what happens when you start to just really open into that? And that can be heavy work. Like, you start opening those things up and start having, just the release of those feelings, right? It can be, it can tear you open, writhing on the floor, like, weeping, wailing, screaming. You have some exorcisms for sure with that, like. But what starts to happen is, and parts work is kind of useful for this as well, that energy then transmutes, right? So in the midst of your feelings of deepest hate for yourself, you will find feelings of the deepest love for yourself, right? That love for yourself that you want to feel lies on the other side of just allowing, accepting and feeling that raw hatred for yourself. And over time, as you repeatedly sort of allow that to come up, whenever it is coming up, you just allow yourself to feel that underlying original pain. It loses its weight, it loses its gravity. It becomes just a fleeting thing. And it goes from, like, being this huge shift of energy and this huge release and this huge exorcism to just a passing, fleeting couple seconds of, like, I feel so loved. Like, and that's it. And then just back to, I love myself. And obviously, like, as I said, parts work. So, like, parts work is all about engaging, creating a dialogue with that part of you, that part that is rooted in these experiences from when you were younger, almost as if it's a separate conscious entity living within you. It's interesting. And you in your present day conscious awareness can dialogue with that part. And generally, like, if you're kind of visual and are using the mind's eye to engage with this part, it will show you a symbol, right, of that part of you. Generally, what people will see is a small version of themselves, because obviously that's the genesis of these parts. But it could be anything, right? Anything the subconscious mind offers as a symbol to this part, this feeling, this experience. And it will take you to kind of, experiences you've had where you were young, where you originally felt that feeling. And then you in your present day awareness can kind of bring yourself into that scene and give that part of you, give that younger version of you what it needed that it didn't receive in that moment. And just that process somehow seems to have an effect, right, of, like, repatterning, reprogramming the subconscious mind, the subconscious belief, right? So repeatedly go into that part, to that scene, whatever it is, giving you what you didn't receive, what you needed. And the whole thing starts to shift. The whole experience you have within yourself starts to shift when these things get triggered. And as I say, it's not about getting rid of that part. It's not about changing the reality of sometimes you're going to feel unloved. But it's changing how you respond to that when it comes up. Noticing when the conscious thought patterns and behaviors that are built up around trying to avoid that feeling, noticing when they're online, being like, oh, cool, there must be this feeling that's been triggered. Let me just connect to that. Getting comfortable with that, building capacity to hold that, allowing that to flow smoother and smoother and easier and quicker until it's just a fleeting, and very quickly returning to, yes, good, I am enough, that I love myself. I'm so loved. And the more you do that work and that process of transmutation and that kind of those interactions with these parts of yourself, the deeper the love that you start to feel for yourself becomes. And recognizing, of course, as with all of these things, is a process, right? It takes time. Any of these big processes of kind of addressing subconscious beliefs and patterns, and it's not days and weeks, it's months and years. And committed, intentional effort with that, right? But making that space for yourself, showing up for those parts of yourself, not resisting, making space for it all. getting to know, right? Getting to know these parts of yourself. We often have very little memory of these experiences, these feelings that we had when we were young, right? And so much of what we do is crazy. So much of what we do, what we think, how we act, what we're doing all the time, so much of that is geared towards just avoiding feelings. And so making space for it all. If we're thinking about loving ourselves, what are the qualities of love, right? Acceptance, inclusivity of all. Making space for all these different parts, accepting all these different parts of who we are. This is you, right? This is you. This part of you might not like, but it's you. And ultimately all these parts want is to be loved. So can you give them that love? Can you love the part of you that hates you? Can you see that for what it is? Integrate that into your experience of self. Make peace with it. And learn to love it. And then enjoy as your experience, your capacity for love, of self and other, and of just love. Continuously unfolds in spectacular ways.